Take your time, brother.
Yeah, sorry. Give me a second.
You good?
You're all right, man.
When his parents came to pick him up, the school did not disclose to the parent that the kid was a part of an attempted abduction. So when parents asked him, why did my kid piss his pants at school, the teachers and the people in charge did not tell them that there was an attempted abduction.
This is not an easy video for me to make. The guy that was just speaking is Detective Richard High, otherwise known as Angry Cops, one of the key members, part of the core friend group of the Unsubscribe podcast. Most of the guys that created and host the Unsubscribe podcast, including Eli, Donut Operator, the AK guy, and Angry Cops, have by extension become friends of mine over the years through me having just made a bunch of content about Escape from Tarkov that turned into guys that wanted to know more about this particular video game and turned into a friendship with a lot of these guys that got me invited to go to range days and all of these other things. Now, depending on who you are in my audience, and I know that I tend to talk about video game stuff, and this is one of those videos where I'm going off and talking about stuff that doesn't necessarily have to do with video games, but this is something that is very, very crazily important to me because I actually live very close to where Detective High operates. Angry Cops, for those of you that don't know, is an SVU detective working in the city of Buffalo, New York. Now, I am about an hour and a half east of that in upstate New York as well, without me like overtly doxing myself. You guys can put two and two together. But I live in upstate New York, just, you know, relatively nearby, and this is a little bit too close to home for me to just ignore. What you are watching, or what you watched, is Angry Cops talking about how the city of Buffalo is not only refusing to participate in an investigation, but also failing to report acts of violence, sexual assault, in some cases attempted rape, assaults, thefts, many other instances of assault and other heinous acts against children. And the school is not only refusing to cooperate with police, but also obstructing the investigation and also failing to report the instances that have occurred to begin with. I'm going to go through a timeline with you guys on why this has been going on and what's been going on and how this is ongoing. But the reason why I'm bringing this to your attention, and the reason why this is hitting close to home for me, is because living where I do, I don't believe that what I'm about to show you is an isolated incident. I don't believe that it is isolated only to the city of Buffalo, which is one of the largest school districts in the entire state of New York. I believe it's the second or the third largest school district in the entire state. I don't believe this is an isolated incident to just this school. I think this is something that is being put into practice by a lot of public schools, not just in New York, but also elsewhere. And the reason why I'm making this is because all of you, even though this is outside of the realm of what I normally talk about, a lot of you guys are a little bit older. A lot of you guys have kids. A lot of you guys obviously care about your families. So I'm showing you this because I think that it's important that we all take a little bit of initiative and start looking into the districts in which we reside in order to see whether or not they're actually doing the things that they're supposed to be. Because I have a feeling they aren't. And the stuff that I'm going to go through with you guys on this is kind of fucking scary. I'm not even going to lie. It freaks me out. And the more I think about this, the more enraged I get and the more worried I am for my own kids. And I think you guys should be too. So on April 26th, Richard High, Detective High, Angry Cops, goes on the Unsubscribed podcast because he's so frustrated that he is not able to do his job. He doesn't know what else to do. And he whistleblows that the Buffalo school system is in essence not only destroying evidence and hiding evidence, but also actively obstructing justice. And the attorneys that are working with and for the school district, the attorneys that are acting as counsel for the school district and its faculty, are actively coaching the staff on how to avoid and stonewall the cops in their investigations. Following this, there was a bunch of articles that got written. The very next day, even that evening, 2 hours after this video went live, the Buffalo School District got a hold of it and posted an image, a statement that was prominently placed on Twitter saying that the district is prepared to vigorously address these untruths, quote unquote. In essence, saying that the children and the faculty and staff, their priority is safeguarding their children in these schools, and they don't see any wrongdoing in their part. They believe that they are in the right, and they believe that Detective High is blowing this out of proportion. Now, just so that we're all on the same page, when I say that they're destroying evidence, Rich High, Officer High, is saying that they aren't only obstructing by not cooperating with cops. In the case of that moment where he talked about the little boy that had pissed himself, there was an attempted graping of that boy. And in that attempted sexual assault, they deleted the closed circuit TV footage, the CCTV footage of this school, where the footage of this boy was no longer available to police by the time it had been reported, which, by the way, was done, I believe, a month or two after the incident, when it finally was coming to light that there was a second victim. See, originally this was reported that there was only a singular victim, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the timeline. But there was actually a second one, and he had claimed that had it not been for a faculty member having taken cell phone video and provided this to the district attorney's office, the case never would have mentioned that this little boy had ever been assaulted to begin with. That's a huge problem and a massive red flag if true. Now, that same weekend, Detective High ended up going to WKBW, which is the Channel 7 news station in Buffalo, New York, to talk with one of their reporters about what had been going on. And to my knowledge, that interview was 20 or 30 minutes long. But the news story that they provided was only 3.5 minutes of that interview. Not only did they truncate this into a very, very short, small segment, but they also never bothered to upload the entirety of the interview to their own YouTube channel, something that would have likely gotten them significantly more views had they actually used the entire interview and provided it. So he's talking about how schools, every member of faculty at a school is what's called a mandated report. That means they have to, the moment that a child comes to them, or a parent, or a concerned citizen, if someone comes up to a teacher or a member of faculty, somebody that works at the school, and believes that there is something going on that is harming a child in some way, that member of the school district is required by law to report that to law enforcement. There is no pass-go. There is not a collection of $200. You just go and do the friggin' report. You have to call them. That's the deal. If you don't call them, that is illegal, and you can be prosecuted for failure to report. What is going on at the Buffalo School District, according to Detective High, is exactly that. And not only that, but they're also circumventing the process by trying to fudge the numbers. And we'll get into that too in a little bit. This leads us to Monday, April 28th, where the school board for the district of the school district of Buffalo Schools said that they were going to hold an emergency session. They were going to have a meeting. Now, typically, when it comes to these types of sessions, the school board meets for, say, 15 minutes or so with closed doors, what they call an executive meeting, executive portion of the session, where they talk about more privatized stuff, and then they open the doors to the public. They also live stream the meeting for the public to view, and they also upload a recording of that meeting to YouTube for people to view later. Instead of having that happen, they instead had a 3.5-hour session behind closed doors, and then finally let the media in. But while they were waiting to be let in, this happened.
This is an isolated incident. We take this very seriously, and I strongly disagree every time they make both of those statements.
Teachers like Mark Bruno tell me they're not sure what to think about these allegations, but also says he feels the district does have a history of looking the other way.
There's a culture of downplaying violence and other incidents, like the officers mentioning, in this district, really since I started over 20 years ago.
So, we have a teacher with tenure, somebody that's been there for over 2 decades, stating that there is a history of this type of behavior, and what is being alleged does not surprise him whatsoever. Eventually, they were let into the session, and the school board said that they were going to hire an independent third-party investigator. Except when the independent third-party investigators started showing up to the administrative offices on, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday, as they were walking around trying to ask people about what had been going on in the school district, trying to, do the job that the board hired them for, people were a little bit annoyed. They didn't really want to cooperate. They didn't want to answer any questions. They wanted to go and just do their job and not be bothered. Even going so far as to have someone in the finance office snatch the phone out of the hand of the person that was doing the recording on their cellular phone device and spike it on the floor, breaking it. Because if it's one thing that you should do when you're accused of obstructing justice is to further obstruct justice, I guess. Anyway, this brings us to Tuesday morning, where there's a show featuring Ed Dranch, who's the host of a Morning Buffalo TV show on Channel 7 News on the ABC affiliated station, where he started to talk about what was going on with this case.
Well, either way. Yes, just to address, here's the deal with the Buffalo school investigation. The school district is now calling for an external investigation after all of these allegations were made on a podcast over the weekend. And certainly time will tell about what actually happens from.
Good morning, everyone. Here's a view of the 190 going south.
Yeah, and as he's trying to finish what he's talking about, they just cut him off and cut to weather. Because, I guess that segment about abused kids wasn't important enough to spend an extra 15 seconds on. Gotta keep things moving along. Ed Dranch also decided that he was going to go on for the main segment of the morning show after this finally got enough airtime to talk about, because it was, finally important enough to go over, and shoots himself in the foot by saying this.
These are our kids, our students. So how could this possibly be going on, one, and then be going unreported? So you see this podcast, this is Detective Richard High, and he made these claims on a podcast, and he says, look, I know these are serious claims. I know that I could get in trouble for saying this, but I've got to be the voice here, the one who speaks out.
So I'll be honest with you, I started watching this podcast, and my first thought was, this is ridiculous.
What is this?
This is crazy. I'm listening to all these guys burp and just be absolutely foul.
You're looking at the White Claws on the table.
And
is
so
alcohol involved here?
My
Where
first
are they?
thought is, okay, this can't actually be real. But then when you actually listen to
So the thing that shoots Ed here in the foot is he starts this off by talking about his initial impression of the podcast by saying these guys come off as being vulgar, burping, and having White Claw White Claws on the table and acting vulgar, as if to somehow discredit what Detective High has been talking about, the main idea of which is the kids, not dodging this. And in fact, on top of this, all of the news articles that were coming out over the weekend also talked about Detective High, but they all started off by mentioning that Detective High had a quote-unquote rocky past. And then in most of these cases, the first paragraph of said article would talk about how this rocky past had to do with him having been reported on about 30 or so times since 2016 during his tenure on the force, as well as mentioning that he used to make some vines that were a little bit more risque in comedy. Now, Angry Cops, his persona on the internet, is a funny one. And yeah, there's some fringe humor kind of stuff going on, where he picked his head up at one point in time with a face full of white powder like he was high on cocaine. Or a time where he was dancing in the middle of the street with another uniformed black officer talking about racial equality. I mean, just weird fringe things. And for the most part, they're really damn funny. And in no way do I think that any of that stuff should really be jeopardizing his career, nor does it play into whether or not he takes his job seriously. There's nothing wrong with being funny outside of work. I grew up with a stepfather that was a state police officer. He was State Police Officer of the Year in 1994, and that dude knew how to party. In fact, while the media was busy, I guess, kind of slandering Rich, and we'll talk about those infractions in a second, he had this to say.
Children. So while I have been away and out of town, and the local news stations have chose to disparage me or, individual journalists, I've been in Boston trying to find the missing children of Buffalo.
So yeah, while they're busy trying to rag on him for reports against him, yeah, he was doing his job. So about those infractions, Detective High actually addressed those. The way that it works for cops, in case you didn't know, well, at least in New York State, is that you can report a cop for anything that you want. I can call up and make a complaint about any local cop and say I didn't like their shoes weren't shiny enough, or they had a weird haircut, or I didn't think that their badge was completely straight like it should be, or they looked at me silly. Whatever I want to report them for, I can report them, and that's something that the AG's office has to investigate. Internal Affairs has to honor it and like give credence to the report and figure out why the hell somebody would call this in. Are they just being a jerk? Two of them in Detective High's tenure have stuck. The first one was a guy that was an active burglar that Detective High detained, and because he was committing armed robbery, I believe it was armed robbery, Detective High called him fat boy. That's it. He shouldn't have called him fat. That was one of the things that stuck. The other one was a guy that reported Detective High for assault because he was selling drugs next door to one of Detective High's friends that he was visiting, his neighbor. And his friend's neighbor, who had somebody selling drugs out in front of his house, Detective High confronted him. The kid, the 17-year-old kid, took a swing at him, and Detective High headbutted him in the mouth while he was off duty. Since then, that individual has been arrested several more times, and I believe is looking at doing some pretty good prison time. So for those were the two things that Detective High has been brought up on. And then there was another instance where a report got filed, or the media tried to slag him by saying that he had been doing like violence, like racially charged stuff, where he had pinned a naked or semi-naked black man to the ground in the middle of the street, who was called on, somebody called 911 on this individual, I think 7 or 9 times. And when Detective High responded, he brought this person to the ground and pinned him to the ground until he was off duty, until uniformed officers showed up to arrest him. He not only was bashing cars with a skateboard and causing bunches of property damage, but was also exposing himself to people that were walking across the street in the middle of this intersection. So when he was pinned down, all he said, and there's body camera footage to back this up, all he said was, yeah, he's good, we're good. And then the guy that was actually pinned to the ground turned his head and looked up at the uniformed cops and said, yeah, I'm good. I was wondering when you guys were going to show up. So yeah, that's the type of guy that Angry Cops is. Seems like he's just a dude that knows how to do his job the right way. You know, for all the world, for all the dirty cops and bad cops and cops that use excessive force, Detective High, from what I can see of him, is not one of those people. And furthermore, like, he's an SVU detective. He's just trying to find and protect like victims of really, really shitty levels of violence that literally no one wants to have to deal with. The fact that he's able to put up with this stuff in and of itself would drive normal people absolutely bonkers, batshit insane. You know what I mean? Anyway, let's fast forward to May 2nd, the day before my birthday, where the fat electrician Nick ends up making some FOIA requests by posting this and saying if Buffalo Schools wants a third-party investigation, we will give them a third-party investigation. Give us 72 hours. So Nick ends up putting in a bunch of FOIA requests and piggybacks this off of an investigative journalist that has been doing the same thing, looking into this as well. And this is where the stats start to get interesting. And then the infamous binder was born. Nick ends up posting to Twitter as well. Never mind, we didn't even need 24 hours to prove Angry Cops was right. Buffalo Schools is actively obstructing Buffalo police from properly investigating child sexual assaults. We have proof. Full video drops today on Unsubscribe. Don't worry, DA Erie County, if you won't do your job, a bunch of YouTubers will do it for free. No taxpayer funding required. And they include an email address called takethehighroad@gmail.com. High is HY for Richard High. Basically saying if you're a parent or if you're somebody that works at the school district, you want to be anonymous, you want to be specific, whatever it is that you want to do, it's basically a write-in tip line for everyone that is associated with the city of Buffalo that wants to report this stuff. And for those of you that may or may not be watching this, I would encourage you to do the same. If you're somebody that happens to live in, around, used to live in and around Buffalo, New York, you know somebody that does whatever, you know somebody that's interacted with the school, there is no statute of limitations on sexual assault related cases that have to do with school districts anymore. There was just a settlement for $10 million from a guy that got sexually assaulted in 1978. So there's that. On May 4th, this video comes out. The Unsubscribed podcast comes back out with the proof that the Buffalo schools are covering up child abuse, and the infamous white binder that Nick is holding in his hands that is full of FOIA requested data is sitting there, and he is reading off some crazy stuff that has to do with statistics from the Buffalo City School District. Now, I'm not going to bore you guys with the details, but just to give you an idea, okay? Since 2021, there have been over 17,000 calls regarding something having to do with children for a mandated report.
More concerning stats. We've got 881 fights, 176 assaults. We've got 162 incidences of missing persons under the age of 12. We've got 126 assault incidences, and the most
Okay, so what Nick is talking about, those last two, okay? There's 180 something incidences of attempted kidnapping and then 121 instances of sexual assault. Now, of those 17,000+ reports, those are the two big statistics, right? There's fighting too, right? But those two are the real big ones. That's like the SVU detective getting involved. Those allegations specifically. The problem is of those 17,000 and change reports, 54% of them are listed under other or miscellaneous or this one other weird category.
Concerning of all of this is because when Rich came on the original podcast, he said that the school has some level of influence over school resource officers, SROs, and the school is using that influence to get them to not file things appropriately or bury the cases. Out of those 17,772 police calls, 54% of them are listed under other, miscellaneous, or direct patrol. Direct patrol means it was just the SRO on site that responded. There's no further elaboration as to what 54% of those 7,000 calls were relating to.
So what seems to be happening in the 54% of these cases is the security officers, the officers internally in the school system that are calling these things in, are calling them in under what is called information only, meaning there's no emergency, no one needs to come out, it's fine, we have it handled, we're just putting this in as an information only call. Basically just a log that something happened with a little note that gets put in as miscellaneous or other instead of being categorized as a child getting touched or an attempted assault or worse. It's a way for the school to cover it up. And it seems like some of the evidence, at the very least, is supporting this. A reporter for Channel 2 News in Buffalo, Nate Benson, ended up reporting the following.
4% of those were labeled as miscellaneous or a vague school other category. We went back and looked at some of the recent incidents at the schools that were high profile enough for the district to send out a press release. The incident on April 1st, where 2 students ingested THC gummies and a teacher was placed on administrative leave, was labeled as school other when police were called. The incident on February 12th, where someone entered the Charles R. Drew Magnet School, approached a child, and allegedly attacked a staff member, also labeled as school other. That also happened at 2 shelter-in-place incidents at McKinley High School and one at Riverside in March 2024 due to fights reported as school other.
So Detective High goes on to talk about how the only way that they can find these things is if they know that they have to go and look for them. Otherwise, it just ends up getting lost in a pile of things marked other. It goes without saying that if you went and started digging through a lot of these, I would be willing to bet that a bunch of them are going to end up being categorized the wrong way. Just again, another way for them to sweep things under the rug because the school district is either embarrassed or they don't want to have to deal with the extra quote-unquote hassle of having to report this to the authorities and work with them outside of like normal school hours. God forbid the mandated reporters actually do their fucking job. They call it in and they basically say it's just to like make a written note. No emergency, no need to have somebody respond, but the school resource officer, the SRO, the security officer for the school, calls into 911 and says there's no need to bring out a squad car, there's no need to respond. I'm just putting this in as to be notated for a file somewhere. Here's the particulars of the report. Bang, done. It's under miscellaneous and no one ever looks at it a second second time. When it ends up under miscellaneous and not under like sexual assault, let's say, it never ends up in front of an SVU detective's desk. It doesn't end up getting categorized appropriately, and it gets buried in the ether somewhere. And unless you knew exactly what you were looking for very specifically, you would never find it again. And this is where Rich starts talking about how you need to go to one of the stations, provide your ID, and request something that has to do with your kid, regardless of how long ago it was, to one, see if there was a report made at all, and two, to see if it was categorized correctly. Because if it wasn't categorized correctly, chances are no one in the police department that mattered ever saw it, and nothing ever got done. The most damning piece of evidence in this video comes at a later point in time, and I encourage you all to watch this all the way through because it's about an hour long, but it is worth watching. Detective High starts talking about an email that he got immediately before this podcast got made, where they were talking about these cases, this second one. There's a counselor at one of the schools that wrote to him with a statement that she, the counselor, or he, whichever, was instructed to not give to police by the school district. Again, mandated to report. This counselor was told not to provide it to police because reasons, and it was never seen by Detective High until literally the day of this podcast. It ended up in his lap just beforehand, and he ended up grabbing this and reading it for everyone with obvious pieces and parts of it redacted.
The victim's friend stated, "Yes, there is a video. Miss Blank asked who was the boy. I said suspect, and she said okay. She said she would handle it tomorrow. She would handle it tomorrow."
It goes on to talk about how they waited until the next day. They ended up finally seeking out a secondary and then a tertiary person to finally get this report made. There was apparently video of this interaction, this altercation, where 7th grade boys were apparently involved in like sexual assault related activity, several boys and a single 7th grade girl. Obviously, that is something that should have been reported immediately, and you can see how angry this obviously makes Detective High, justifiably so. The problem here is like several levels of failure to report and then the withholding of evidence for this investigation. And the reason why he's reading this out loud is because this case that he had been working on specifically was already closed, and now he has to reopen a new case because this is very likely going to be charges for failure to report on whomever was involved in this. He has to go digging again, this is absolutely proof that they are obstructing. Like, how do you not cause or show obstruction here? This is insane. Well, I'll tell you how it gets worse. You end up having the counsel for the school district on your news show, and you have him say this ridiculous bullshit.
Just the overwhelming number of contacts by Buffalo school administrators to Buffalo Police Department contradicts these salacious claims.
Actually, the numbers came from last week's Channel 2 report after reporter Nate Benson filed a Freedom of Information request with Buffalo Police. So to the Administrators Union after the school board sought what it terms an independent third-party legal investigation of High's claims.
Do you think at some point they would come forward with actual numbers or something, or to rebut what he is saying?
Yeah, the school district is, engaged a third-party investigator, and we look forward to having that independent evaluation. This podcaster's made outrageous claims, not from his Buffalo Police detective desk, in a written memo through the proper chain of command with the proper support of police brass or district attorney.
Attorney Robert Boreanaz, Boreanaz. Dude, it would be awful if somehow Attorney Robert Boreanaz happened to have the information regarding his law firm directly provided to the public, as it were, via the news media with his name right here in the video, and somebody happened to bring up their website and show everybody what the phone number was for his attorney or his legal firm, Lipschitz, Green, Scum, and Cambria. Robert Boreanaz is one of the people representing the Buffalo City School District, and not only tried to discredit Detective High once again, but lost the plot. The entire reason why Detective High is talking to a fucking podcast to begin with is because you douchebags are instructing the school district to not work with the cops trying to investigate the issues to begin with. For fuck's sake. Are you kidding me? I'm trying not to yell because my entire family is asleep, but holy fuck. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, the entire reason why it's not being provided on letterhead to you douche canoes is because you're obstructing justice in informing your client not to work with cops. Tell your clients to follow through on the shit they're supposed to be doing instead of worrying about being embarrassed because they're fucking assholes. Oh, and by the way, it might be a good idea to stop shuffling around assistant principals to different schools every time that they have a mounting of too many assault or sexual advances allegations or whatever being made by kids and parents. So you just shuffle them off to the next school. Or how about the kindergarten or preschool teacher in the school district that had a report made against them because they were shoving 4-year-olds into a bathroom and then closing it with the lights off and holding their foot against the door so the kid couldn't get out as punishment for not listening to their teacher, of which, by the way, they still work for the school district, and they're just not allowed to work with 4-year-olds anymore. Sure, that's going to fix everything. You're fucking kidding me, right? I'm getting heated. Now, every time that somebody has asked the Attorney General's office for a statement, they've basically said that they have an ongoing investigation and they can't give details about an ongoing investigation whether or not the Buffalo School District is obstructing. No one in the AG's office seems to be able to say a goddamn thing, which obviously has led people to be relatively frustrated. So naturally, we go the autistic shame route. The district attorney for the city of Buffalo is this guy. He goes by the name of Michael Keene. And what's interesting about Michael Keene is that back in 1985, Michael Keene got away with doing a bad thing. Michael Keene was charged with a DWI for driving drunk without headlights, going the wrong way down the highway, attempting to flee the police, and attempting to escape the police after failing his sobriety test, injuring an officer in the process. But all of that is relatively ancient history. As it turns out, back in 1985, Mr. Keene's father was rather well connected and had all of those felony charges reduced to misdemeanors and had the court seal the record. Of course, that only got leaked out by accident. No one would ever know anything about that, right? Right, Internet? Right. So if you happen to want to call up the district attorney's office and ask them why they're not doing their fucking job and why it is that they're not levying like shit tons more charges over the last at least handful of years as they should have been doing for all of these misreported cases, unreported cases, and active obstruction of justice, perhaps make mention that Michael Keene had this stuff happen to him. You know, I'm sure it wasn't his fault, though, right? Definitely not his fault. Now, what's super interesting about all of this, and that brings us to today, is that everyone that tried to discredit Detective High by saying that he wasn't appropriately doing his job, not using the proper channels, and the Buffalo School District regarding this as untruths. Remember that? Not calling him a liar, but saying that they were untruths. Yeah, as it turns out, the first thing that he talked about having to do with that little boy and all of that, as of now, the gentleman Shane Cronin, the 30-year-old man that was arrested in February following this incident, was charged with second-degree kidnapping and 2 counts of luring a child to commit a felony, 3 counts of endangering the welfare of a child that is likely to cause injury, 4 counts of burglary, and 5 counts of assault causing injury on school grounds. 2 counts of luring a child. Not one, 2. So as it turns out, maybe Detective High isn't all that full of shit after all. Ass face? And by ass face, I of course mean the legal counsel for Buffalo School District. I am all kinds of pissed off at this. I am all kinds of pissed off that the Robert Boreanaz and his team of douchebags would actually try to find some moral standing to defend the people at the Buffalo City School District. Do you really need the billable hours that bad? Unbelievable. Anyway, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go take 10 milligrams of melatonin and try to get a good night's sleep. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully this provided you with an relatively accurate timeline of everything that's been going on. If you watching this video are not at least as pissed off at this bullshit as I am, I would encourage you to go find a therapist and figure out why it is you're a sociopath. Because if you don't see the potential mirroring of this in your own school district, wherever it is that you live, if you are seeing this, you should. Because the likelihood that this is isolated only to the city of Buffalo is extremely unlikely. I'm very likely going to be submitting my own FOIA request for my own local school district because I want to see what they've been doing. And I think everyone else should too. Thank you guys for watching. I apologize that that this was not a video about video games. Sometimes things are more important than that. And since I have a somewhat small platform, I intend to use it for everything that I possibly can. Hopefully you guys will stay along for the ride with me. I look forward to it if you do. If not, I understand. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for lending me your eyeballs, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Peace.